Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to this session. I'm delighted to be joined today by Yelda Dari, who is the Regional Business Development Director for Sustainable Technology Solutions at Honeywell. Yelda joined us recently at the Oman Energy ESG Forum in Muscat. And we are now going to be presenting an online series to recap the highlights of some of the fantastic presentations and intelligence that we gathered at the forum from some of our guest speakers, Yelda being one of them. So this is one of a series that we'll be doing for those who want to listen in again on what was presented, and for those, of course, some of whom missed our forum, unfortunately, but we found that selected a few sessions that we really thought were of great value to bring to you all again and to have access to. So Yelda, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I'm going to be sort of handing the floor over to you in half a minute to present to us on the topic today of hydrogen and carbon capture solutions, a path to carbon neutrality today, and how that can be accelerated. So we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us on that. And then hopefully you'll allow me a few minutes to come back to you with a few questions on that for our viewers. Thanks, Yelda. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. The event 2 weeks back was absolutely fantastic, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity now with you again to go through the presentation, Diala. Thank you very much. So I probably can go and share my screen, and please let me know when you can see my screen. Some forward-looking statement here, but without getting into the presentation. So basically, we know what the challenge is, right? We know that when it comes to the climate change, we know what the problem we are facing. If we keep going on the way we are, then we're going to hit 3.5 degree global temperature raise, which is disastrous. If all the government actually deliver what they have committed that they're going to deliver, we're going to land somewhere around 2.5 degrees C. We still do have time in order to achieve less than 2 degree temperature rise as per the Paris Agreement if we triple the investments within the next 3 years. And when it comes to energy transition, we also have an idea how we have to get there. We have to electrify everything that we can so that they run on the renewable power, and whatever that cannot be electrified, we have to switch to hydrogen, we have to switch to sustainable fuel, etc. Definitely looking into higher efficiencies, optimization, and all of that. But one of the main challenges that we are facing is that if you take all the possible options for decarbonization, and if you rank them on a chart, and basically on the left you rank all the technologies that can save us money versus those that are going to cost us money, we see that those technologies that are costing us money have much higher weight. Actually, I should go back. Are going to have much higher weight. And this is the challenge that we are facing, the cost of these technologies, how to bring the costs down. So the other challenge that we are facing is not just about replacing the fossil fuel, is also about sustaining the energy supply for the world, for the population of the world, and as we know, is expanding. Just last month, the world hit 8 billion population, and it's expected that by 2050, we're going to be landing somewhere around 9.7 billion population. Of course, people are going to come with expectations in energy use. And we try to see at Honeywell Europe that forecast how the future is going to look like within the constraint of 1.5 degrees C to see what do we have to achieve, what is the challenge that we are facing right now. And we went with 2 scenarios. The first scenario, we call it Gulf. And it comes back to the lifestyle, that if we decide to continue the same lifestyle as people have in the US, like basically owning big houses, every family member having their own car, having a lot of stuff, material stuff, that we call it goals, versus the yoga. That's where people decide to go with, less material, more virtual, smaller houses, and that's what we're calling yoga. Today, we are somewhere around 18 terawatt energy. And if we continue with the US lifestyle, this is expected to go up to 39.6 terawatts. So pretty much double the energy has to be supplied to the world by 2050. But if people decide to go with more Japanese sort of lifestyle, then we have to increase that energy supply by 50%. So the challenge that we are facing is not only to transit from fossil fuels into environmentally friendly energy sources, but also sustaining the energy supply. Now, when you look at it, basically, you see that IEA energy technology perspective is introducing different pathways that we can follow in order to achieve our goal. And as we mentioned, obviously, hydrogen or electrification, aviation fuel, they are all part of it. But CCUS accounts for almost 15% of emission reductions by 2070. That means that we really have to scale up. And this is expected to, the CO2 capture is expected to increase by 20 times within the next 10 years, which translates into 70 to 100 projects needed every year through 2050. But the good news is that the technologies are already there. We have been, many of this technology, the backbone of it have already been deployed in industry for more than 70 years. So we have that range of the solutions that we require here in order to achieve our sustainability and climate goals. But it's not just about capturing, it's also about transportation and of that CO2 utilization and also the storage. So obviously the CO2, once you capture it, you have to move it around. There is always a significant, in many cases, there is significant distance between the point of CO2 capture to the point where you want to utilize the CO2 or you want to inject it under the ground. And when it comes to actually injecting it under the ground, the good news is that there is a lot of storage capacity available, even way more than what we need in order to meet our climate goals by 2050. If we look at everything all together in one slide, the whole chain end-to-end offering, as we said, obviously it starts with capturing the CO2, but then the compression and transportation are also very challenging because in many cases you have different points of CO2 injection is a common pipeline that is going to be built in order to receive the CO2 from different points. So already that pipeline management is critical. And when it comes to the wells, in order to inject it down into the ground, the wellhead management, the pressure, temperature, and the quantity of the gas that is going in there is also so critical to be managed and monitored, because you would certainly want to have that ownership tracking to know whose CO2 you're injecting down the ground. Different stakeholders want to know that so that they can back it up. They back up their claims or report to the governments. Sorry, is there, I hear something. Would you like to interrupt me, ask any questions or anything, Diala?
No, I mean, I always have questions, but yeah, I mean, well, why not? Let's do that. It'll be more interesting to do that on the way rather than leave it to the end. Right. I mean, sure. I like that you've sort of highlighted there. Let's talk about one or two points you've already started with. Technology. You said the technology is there, for whether it's for hydrogen or carbon capture, etc. But a lot of people say that we still need to be investing more to be able to scale up the technology. Maybe that's more relevant to hydrogen. But again, would you say, that we still need to be putting more into the scale of the tech that we need for some of these? Some of them are experimental, but obviously we're already there with certain technologies. Where are we with that? And do you think we need a bit more investment and acceleration on that? funding?
Absolutely. Technology is a very critical piece in order to make all of this work. And you mentioned hydrogen, but we can also look at the technologies in order, for example, to utilize the CO2. The good news is that over the last 70 years in the gas industry, there has been many technologies that have been deployed in order to remove the CO2 from the gas. Maybe at that point, the concern was not the climate, but it was mainly to protect the downstream equipment and to avoid, in fact, hydrate formation, for CO2 ice formation, etc. The technologies have been there. We have a range of solvent technology, adsorbent technology, membrane, cryogenic system that we can all bring together in order to capture the CO2. Or when it comes to hydrogen, for the production of hydrogen, the technology of the SMRs have been there for so long. But now the challenge is, okay, while we're producing this hydrogen, we have to make sure this hydrogen is going to be clean. So we have to capture that CO2, which again, comes back to technologies that we are deploying to capture the CO2, this time from the SMRs, steam methane reformers that are for the production of hydrogen. So the good news is the backbone is there. Obviously, we have to customize these solutions for the challenges that we are facing now. I will give you an example later on in this presentation, for example, for post-combustion CO2 capture, the technology that we have developed for the post-combustion of the CO2. That I will get back to it in a few slides from now. But certainly there is a need to continue investment in the technology to bring the cost down, because as we saw, the cost is a very significant factor right now, especially in this part of the world when the government incentives are not yet in place, or the penalties, let's say.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting. The other point you mentioned, which kind of almost refers to government incentives, certification, etc. That whole, who's doing what, and so that people get, users and people who are converting and capturing the CO2 can also get credit, I suppose, for doing what they're doing. And you mentioned how storage is available. We've got that sorted, but not necessarily a way to track and manage who is inputting into that storage, and so that, and therefore people sort of tracking who's put what and where. Is that a big concern today, or is the focus still more on let's get these efficiencies and costs down, and then we'll kind of look at certification and see who's doing what, and tracking and monitoring what's been stored and what's been utilized?
So Diala, I think that goes back to which part of the world we are looking at. As you mentioned, in some countries, such as United States, that, for example, companies can benefit from 45Q. Right now, we know that for enhanced recovery, they have increased actually the amount of tax credit to $60 US dollar for EOR. And that is even more for pure sequestration, up to $85 right now. So in those areas that their incentives are already in place, the projects are going ahead because they will have a payback. And in many cases, when it comes to transportation, there are going to be common infrastructure. When there is a common infrastructure, then tracking becomes critical, because it doesn't make sense for companies to go and build their own pipeline of CO2. We are expecting more and more clusters to come online. And that's why tracking is so important, because that company is claiming to their shareholders that we are capturing the CO2. They have to prove it, right? We have to enable them, help them to prove it. And that's where the Honeywell company, we are here with our technologies to enable that. In some other places of the world, probably that there are no incentives or penalties yet in place. Probably we have to look into more lower hanging fruits, such as anything that is energy efficiency, which has a faster payback, because even if the company is not worried about the climate, they are worried about their OPEX, right? About their bill. So anything that is aligned with optimization and higher energy efficiency, getting more with less, translates into benefit for the company that is performing that. So I think it depends on where we are, but certainly tracking is a critical point. And coming back to this slide, as we were showing, Yes, we do have the capability to support our client when it comes to wellhead management, pipeline management, on the quantities that are being injected. And also, one important thing, as we mentioned, they are so far away from each other. You want to have a single remote control center where you can see it and you can see what's going on across the whole chain. And you want to be able to do asset filtering so that, for example, company A, when they are looking at their dashboard, they only see the assets that belong to them. Probably we don't want them to see companies B's performance or the other way around, right? Why? The one who is looking after the whole operation want to have a holistic view on everything across this chain on what's going on. So we can customize who sees what. And this is also very powerful. And on top of that, we can leverage other capabilities of cloud computing, etc., to check the health of the equipment and see how they are performing, whether they are turbines or compressors, etc. So the holistic integrated approach is the key, and this is something that we can bring to our clients when they are looking at significant scale projects of CO2 capture in Oman, for example.
Yeah, and I mean, and as you said, the whole value chain coming together, as you like, that's so applicable across so many different solutions, isn't it? That this piecemeal looking at even solitary parts of the value chain is A, not efficient, and B, could also be that you're missing something. So, and it's cost efficient as well, not just energy efficient to do so. Yeah, I'll let you carry on, but just as we're sort of talking about efficiencies, it's very often the case when we have conversations about hydrogen and CCS and sort of new solutions to sort of carbon capture. Big criticism that comes up is that the world and industries and companies still aren't doing what they can today about efficiencies. That's the easy, low-hanging fruit, and that yes, hydrogen solutions and CC are being developed and being matured as and when, but we still don't have enough being used of what is out there in terms of solutions for efficiencies. Would you agree with that? And if that's the case, do you think that could in any way sort of deter the focus on the sort of more complicated, newer solutions that we're working on here?
I fully agree on that point, that we have to start with lower hanging fruits. And of course, the efficiency comes on top of the list. But that alone is not going to be enough, because as we said, if you really want to meet the targets of the climate change targets, just one path is not going to be sufficient. We have to deploy even more costly technologies at the same time that we are looking into the efficiency. Unfortunately, there is not much time left, which means though we have to prioritize what we want to go after, and certainly energy efficiency is on top of the list, but we cannot just stop there, because then we're going to miss the opportunity to meet the targets that have been set.
Okay, please do carry on. I have a couple more questions, but let's see what else you have to show us. Thank you.
Right, sure. So basically, coming back now, we were talking here about the capture and the whole supply chain, but then zooming in more into the capture, as Honeywell UOP, actually, we have the whole range of solutions that, as I mentioned previously, we have been deploying in the oil and gas industry for more than 70 years. That includes the solvent system, our adsorbent, cryogenic, and membrane. And why this is so important for our client? Because when they come to us, we have this toolkit with all of this technology in it, and we can look into it and say, okay, so this is your stream, this is what you have, and this is what you need. So this CO2 with this purity, this is the stream specifications that you need. And we can look into our toolkit and come up with a hybrid of solution or a standalone solution. In many cases, it's a hybrid solution, which makes it even more powerful, that can help our clients achieve their goal actually at the lowest OPEX and CAPEX. And like a few minutes back, you mentioned about the technology. Here we have done something very exciting with respect to carbon capture from post-combustion streams. You know, these streams, they are very challenging because the partial pressure of CO2 in it is low, the pressure is low, and also there are waste gases which are hard on the solvent. They make the solvent degrade so fast. So we came up, we have made a partnership with Austin, Texas University, and they have developed a solvent, a high mass transfer solvent, which brings a lot of benefits to our clients. If you look at the typical solvent system, you have the absorber and you have the stripper and you have the heat exchanger. But we looked into this and see how we can further, improve that for the post-combustion application. Thanks to this particular solvent that we have developed, actually, this absorber can become shorter. So you already have savings in the CapEx and OpEx. The CO2 stream that will be leaving the battery limit is going to be at higher pressure because, again, the solvent can tolerate higher temperature, which means even higher pressure, which means the CO2 can be supplied at high pressure. That's very important because we already saw that usually the CO2 has to be compressed to the pressures above its critical pressure, way twice as much, probably 150 bars and above. So if you can already have the pressure at higher, CO2 at higher pressure at battery limit, it's a huge advantage. And of course, we can minimize the heat of the regeneration of the solvent. So this technology is what we can implement on flue gases from the power plant, from steel plant, from cement plant, any flue gases. This is a technology that sits there and can bring significant advantages to the clients that they want to capture the CO2 from those polluting post-combustion flue streams.
Okay, great. I mean, yeah, please carry on. Yeah.
Go ahead, Yala. I mean, I was just moving into the hydrogen topic. So maybe if there is something on CO2.
Yeah. Well, before we focus on on the hydrogen a bit more. So the CO2 in terms of, I mean, and you sort of just showed us in the previous chart the different types of industries, steel, cement, hard to abate industries, generally speaking. And there's nice diagrams there we can see the full sort of value chain of where that's going, and then obviously into storage, sequestration. What about reuse? I mean, there is, of course, a lot out there already on what we're going to do with this. Once we capture the CO2, we can store it, but we can also, where can we reuse it safely, obviously, and without further emissions? So how accelerated a format is that progressing at these days, or is it an afterthought? Let's just get the CO2 out, then we'll think about if we can reuse it in any sustainable way.
This is a very, very, in fact, common question and very valid question, actually, that what can we do with all of that CO2 that we're going to capture? Well, there are two challenges here. First of all, CO2 is a very stable molecule. Means that if you want to break it down, convert it to something else, you have to put a lot of energy. And of course, if this energy is coming from the fossil fuel, then we are defeating the purpose. So this is one of the main challenges that we are facing, that how we can environmentally friendly way convert the CO2 into the other products that we may be using later on. But at the same time, also the scale, the amount of CO2, we are talking about million tons of CO2 that has to be captured. There is no industry out there that can absorb all of this CO2. So the realistic expectation is that probably more than 90%, of all of this CO2 that is going to be captured have to be sequestrated under the ground, or go to be stuck under the ground. Only maybe 10% of it can be utilized. Now, if you're asking what is the possible path for utilization, of course, we are looking into how to converting it and how to use it directly. For direct use, usually enhancer recovery and urea production are the two paths for direct use of CO2. But when it comes to conversion, we are looking into electrochemical conversion of CO2 and thermal conversion of CO2. Electrochemical conversion of CO2 would be converting the CO2, for example, to formic acid, ethylene, methanol, and imagine methanol itself then can be converted into aviation fuel. So you will enable the whole green, supply chain path once you convert this CO2, for example, into methanol, or through thermal conversion into methanol, or again, dry forming, syngas, acrylic acid, etc. But again, the challenge is all of these technologies, as you mentioned earlier, majority of them have been demonstrated in a smaller scale, not in a commercial huge scale. And that's the challenge right now, that the R&D departments of the companies like us, UOP, are looking into it on how to make these technologies more accessible and cheaper and more realistically, be able to use it with this huge amount of CO2s that we will be dealing with in the future.
Okay, great. And you mentioned EOR, of course, where there's a very good example here in the UAE where that's being done at one of the plants here quite successfully. Yeah, please, let's move on to hydrogen.
Sure. So hydrogen is also extremely exciting. And I know all the countries, especially in the region, they're very big on hydrogen specifically. And there's a lot of talk on green hydrogen going on in Oman, in the UAE, in Saudi, in the whole region. What we know about hydrogen is that by 2050, we are expecting that the demand for hydrogen is going to increase to 660 million tons, while today we are somewhere around 90. And that's mainly is going to be driven for the use of hydrogen in power, in mobility and buildings, etc. And if you look at it, how we are going to shift away from gray hydrogen into blue and green, we see that in the future, we are expecting a future where blue and green is going to completely replace the gray hydrogen production. Now, which one is going to be the dominant one would mainly depend on which country, again, which geographies we're talking about, what's the access to the natural gas, what's the access to sequestration, and or what is the access to the renewable power, the land, the water. And certainly, what are the government incentives? What is in place in order to actually encourage the hydrogen production, whether it's blue or green? But something important to take into account is the carbon footprint comparison between green hydrogen and blue hydrogen. And I would like to encourage all our audiences to check this out. It's a Hydrogen Council report, which was released in 2021, and it compares the greenhouse gas emissions for the whole life cycle, actually of the technology, is life cycle carbon intensity of the hydrogen production, whether it's blue or green, and it compares it. Like, for example, it says if you have a solar plant that runs 1,500 hours per year with proton exchange membrane, it's the value is 1. This value is 1 kilogram per every kilogram of green hydrogen production, 1 kilogram of greenhouse gas emissions, right? This is very much comparable, as you can see, with the SMR, where you're already capturing 90% of the CO2 from it, because that stands at 1.5. You see, so they're not so far away. And this is something important to highlight, that there is a huge value in pursuing blue hydrogen projects at the moment, while we are in transition, waiting until green hydrogen becomes cheaper and more accessible. Why? Because it will allow for the infrastructure to be developed. It's not going to be overnight that we're going to have the transportation for the hydrogen figured out, or distribution, all of that. We have to start today, and we have to supply the clean hydrogen today. And the way to do that is to seriously consider the blue hydrogen, while we're waiting for the green to become economically more, I would say, accessible to everyone. Again, talking about blue hydrogen, as we know, it's nothing but converting the gray hydrogen production units, which are sending the CO2 into the atmosphere, converting them to blue by capturing that CO2, not allowing that CO2 to be vented into atmosphere anymore. That's what we call blue hydrogen. And there are technologies. We have, as Honeywell, we have a range of technologies that we can do that. And we are particularly excited about this one because this one, it's like killing two birds with one stone. Not only allows you to capture the CO2, but also it helps you to increase the yield of the hydrogen production across your SMR by more than 10%. So again, we are very excited to talk about potential companies that are looking into that and to share with them the advantages of this technology. But certainly blue hydrogen is something to consider. But as Honeywell, we are not only in blue, we are also in green, and we are utilizing our vast experience in the membrane and catalyst over so many years. And we have come up with catalyst-coated membranes, which is the heart of the electrolyzer. So basically, membrane, it's got to conduct current, and what it is, it has catalyst on both sides of it, and which facilitates the split of the water into oxygen and hydrogen. That's what the membrane is the heart of the electrolyzer. And also the cost of it is 10%, less than even 10% of the whole cost of the electrolyzer stack, but it sets the rate of the process. So it dictates the cost of everything else. So it's very important that we work with a membrane that actually enables the highest current density and highest efficiency. And this is exactly what we are working on as Honeywell UOP with different electrolyzers companies to bring the cost down and to increase the efficiency and the current density. But not only in that, we are also
of course, sorry to interrupt you,
Sure.
Yelda, the capacity of the electrolyzers, because I mean, I'm not an engineer, but from what I know, there's a lot of comments always about, as you said, blue hydrogen, especially in this region, we've got the natural gas, etc. There's a very natural advantage. Green will take time in terms of trying to get everything up and running. And the one question being, how quickly can we really ramp up electrolyzer capacity? That whole capacity, we need X amount of capacity to really make green hydrogen a viable, 50% alternative, let's say, to blue. Are there any? I mean, you're in behind the technology of the catalyst and everything that's going into that. Are there any sticking points? Are there any sort of walls where technology companies like yours are facing, which are hard to overcome on these solutions? Is there anything that you come up against that's proving to be a slight decelerator to getting that electrolyzer capacity to where we want it to be?
Right. So I, as you mentioned beautifully, actually, the capacity is the main issue, and comes the end of the day is the cost, right? We have to bring the cost down so that we can deploy that in a much larger scale. And one of the main driver for the cost of the electrolyzer is that you want to be able to get more current into the smaller area. And this is the job of the membrane that we are actually working on here, which is actually, it's allowing to have more current into the smaller area, so you have lower resistance for the same voltage. That will help to bring the whole cost down, the cost of the whole electrolyzer stack down. And that will certainly help with bringing the higher capacity on a stream later on. So we are looking at it from one perspective now, which is we believe that we can use our knowledge in the catalyst and the membrane technology to help bringing the costs lower. But also the purification part of it is also another important aspect, because that hydrogen that leaves the electrolyzer is going to be saturated with water. There is going to be probably oxygen crossover. So we have to get rid of these impurities to make it, oops, my presentation moves itself. We have to purify it in order to make it, make the specification what is required for using the hydrogen in the fuel cell, for example. And this is the other area that we are bringing in our knowledge in the PSAs. We have more than 1,100 units of the PSA around the globe in order to purify that hydrogen so that it can later be used for different applications that require the higher purity of the hydrogen. So yeah, these are the things that we do, and we are very excited to be in this space and bringing the whole range of technology and solutions to support our clients basically the best way that we can. So yes, I think with that I stop. I'm even past my half an hour that you had told me before, Diala, but I stop here, coming back to you.
Well, thanks so much, Ayala. No, thank you. I mean, we have run out of time actually, but perfect timing. And thank you so much for that, Ayala. Of course, I mean, there's a lot more that we could delve into. You know, there's it's more of a macro question I had, which is about off-takers, but that's more of a policy question really, and how governments actually are supporting this whole industry by guaranteeing or incentivizing off-takers so that companies like yours and those looking for solutions from Honeywell are incentivized to make that investment, right? To come up with these solutions, i.e. the demand side of the equation, you know, what industries are looking to offtake the hydrogen or even to utilize the CC solutions that you're providing. But thank you so much to Yelda Dahi, the Regional Business Development Director of Sustainable Technology Solutions at Honeywell Europe. Thanks so much, Yelda, for joining us again.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. It was fantastic to be on this platform, Diala. Thank you so much.